Good evening, students. Again, I am going to discuss definitions and declarations of a class. So first, I think, do you remember what is class? So when we define a class from the point of view of data types, then a class is a derived data type which consists of different data types as well as functions together. So basically a class is a derived data type. So a class in C++ combines related data and functions together. It makes a data type which is used for creating objects of this type. Again, we can also say a class represents a real world entity. They have both data types, properties, that means characteristics, and associated operations, that means behavior, and sometimes it is also functions. Now, what is the syntax of class definitions? So then we can use the keyword class, then name of the class, then we start the class by curl braces, then we define visibility modes, 3 types of visibility modes: private, protected, and public. All are these keywords, and using colon we declare variable declarations, that means data members, function declarations, that is member functions, methods. Similarly for 3 cases: protected, variable declarations, function declarations. In public also we can variable declarations, function declarations, etc. Then we can close the function class with semicolon, ended with semicolon. So now what do you mean by this keywords private, public, protected? In C++, the keyword private and public are, as well as protected, are also known as access specifiers. The data hiding concept in C++ is achieved by using the keywords private. The private data and functions can only be accessed from within the class itself. Public data and functions are accessible outside the classes. So the scenario of class we can define in this way: class, Broderson's class, then we next section is data members and member functions. Suppose in some private mode, that is in private section, some data members and member functions which can only be accessed from within the class. Next, in public sector, data members and member functions which can only be accessed from outside the class. So in this way we can define class. So data hiding can be achieved by using private visibility mode. The data declared under private sections are hidden and safe from accidental manipulations. The functions that operate on the data are generally in public visibility mode so that they can be accessed from outside the class, but this is not a rule. that we must follow. Now come to another important points, member functions definitions. The class specification can be done in two parts. Class definitions, which describe both data members and member functions. Next, class method definitions, which describe how certain class member functions are coded, are defined. In C++, the member functions can be written in two ways. One is inside class definitions, another is outside class definitions. So in inside class definition, when a member function is defined inside a class, we don't require to place a membership label along with the function name. And we use only small functions inside the class definitions, and such functions are known as inline functions. So inline functions are faster. When we execute programs, it runs faster, but memory consumption is more than that of non-inline functions. Now when we define functions outside the class definitions, then we use scope resolution operator, that is double colon. So this is scope resolution operator. So the syntax of define a function outside the class is name of the class, then scope resolution operator and function name. So the syntax for the member function defined outside the class definition is, first we must give return type, whatever the value returned by functions, sometimes non-returning function, then we give void here. If return some integer or character or float values, then we give integer, character, float, and then name of the class, then scope resolution operator, then function name with argument list, whatever pass parameter is given here. So now then start, then put up the functions and close that function. In this way we can use functions inside the class and outside the class. When we give some example, then it will be very clear for you. Now next, declaration of objects as instance of a class. Now we know that objects is nothing but instance of a class. Object is just variable of a class. So objects are of a class are declared after the class definitions. We must first class define, then we create object or we declare objects. So here with just example, by picking a class name largest, then object 1, object 2. We'll create two objects, object 1 and object 2 of largest class type. As mentioned earlier, in C++, the variable of a class are known as objects. Yes, you know it. In C++, all member functions of a class are created and stored when the class is defined. This is very important point. When we define a class, then all member functions of a class are created and stored in memory space, which can be accessed by all objects related to that class. Similarly, memory space is allocated separately to each object for their data members. Member variables store different values for different objects of a class. So the concept can be defined as follows. This common for all objects. So member functions 1, member functions 2, member functions 3, they share memory space common for all, memory allocated when member functions are defined. So this space is for member function 1, this space is member function 2, this space is member function 3. This space is allocated when member functions are defined. Similarly, object, suppose object 1, object 2 is created after creating class, defining class. Then data members 1, data members 2. So this memory space for object 1, data members 1, for object 2, data members 2. In this way, memory allocated when objects are declared. A class is member functions and objects in memory. Now we are going to discuss accessing members from objects. Okay? After defining a class and creating a class variable, that is objects, we can access the data members and member functions of the class. Okay, for that we take an example. Suppose, simple example, we define a class student. So student is a class. Then we start the class with private visibility mode, the data members, character type of this character array, registration number of 10 characters, then name of 30 characters, integer age, character address of 25. These are actually attributes. These are the data members of the class student, through which we can specify the student through registration number, through name, through age, through address. Next, we define two member functions in public visibility mode. So we generally define member function in public visibility mode so that we can access data outside the class. For example, void initiate data, that is a member functions which actually data are initiate. Now we can read data from these functions. So start in this body of functions, then display data, through which we can display data of the record of the students with the help of these functions. So it is also non-returning functions, that is why void. So, and that we close the class. Okay, that means these functions, both functions are inside the class. Okay, and then we create object of student type, that is OB. It is student type object. It is a class variable also we created. Then we access both member functions through the object OB with dot operator. Through the object OB dot operator. So object OB dot initiate data, this first member functions. We accessing first member functions. Then OB dot display data, this is the second member functions, and through accessing with this syntax. Here the data members can be accessed in the member functions as they have private scope, and member functions can be accessed outside the class as they have in public visibility mode. Now another important concept of a class is how we define static class member. So it is also important concept of a class. Data members and member functions of a class in C++ may be defined or qualified as static. How? Static data members, it is generally used to store value common to the whole class. Suppose one value is common for the whole class, then we define it as static data members. So static data members differ from an ordinary members in the following ways. How? Only a single copy of the static data member is used by all objects. So for static data members, only single copy is used by all objects. Number 2, it can be used within the class, but its lifetime is the whole program. So within the class we can use static data members, but its lifetime is in the whole program. So how we declare this static data members? So it can be defined within the class or outside the class. How? For example, we take student as class student. So static keyword is used for static data members, declaring data members within the class. So static integer count is actually static data members of the class student. Then we close this. Static data members is if we define the same static data member outside the class, then just we need return value, return type, then class name, then scope resolution operator, then data members count. In this way we can also use. Now the definition outside the class is a must. We can initialize the static member at the time of definitions as count is initially 0. So when integers, this is initially 0. If we define 3 objects, then student, object 1, object 2, object 3, we can, but they share the same count value for all objects. Okay. Now next come to static member functions. A static member functions can access only the static members of a class. We can do so by putting the keyword static before the name of the functions while declaring it. For example, same example, suppose class student, static integer count, this is the static data members, then public visibility mode, then we define a function, static member function, static void show count void. No parameter is passed. This static member function, that was static is used, and no return type, that is void show count. Number of count is shown by this, but value of count is shown by these functions. So cout count this. In this way we can show the value of count. Initially student count is 0. So here I put, so after in this way we can show the show count. When we do programs, then its concept is clear to you. Just you remember this first, then after running, executing some example, then you must clear the scenario of static data members and member functions. In C++, static member functions differ from other member functions in following ways. Number 1, only static members functions or variables of the same class can be accessed by static member functions. So we cannot inherit, we cannot, one static member of a class we cannot use in another class. So number 2, it is called by using name of class rather than objects as given below. So we suppose name of the class, scope resolution function name. For example, student, scope resolution show count. So this is the show count is static member functions of class student. In this way you can define. Next, another important concept, friend class. So friend class concept is same as in our day-to-day life. Friend, when Ram is friend with Rohim, then some private informations is known to of Ram is known to Rohim. From Rohim, they share some private information because they are friends. Similar concept we can also use in the C++. A class can be made a friend to another class. For example, class 2, class 1. So we can define first class 1. Now, this is the declaration of the class prototype. As functions prototype, here also 2 is actually class 2 is defined first. Then is declaration first declared, and now define class 1. So whatever public, so then friend class 2, friend keyword is used, and class 2, that means one class is friend to the class 2. So class 2 is declared as friend of class 1. In this way we can close the class 1. Now from the class 2, all members of class 1 can be accessed. So when we give some examples, then it will be clear for you. Basically, this is the concept of theory as well as synthetic structure of class. So in the next class we give some examples so that your concept is cleared by that examples. So I think this is helpful for you. Okay, thank you. We'll meet in the next class.